Hi everyone! So we're going to work on breaking down a haiku and a few other short poems. I think a haiku is the most notable short poem that I can think of. It's one of the shortest, I think it's the official shortest poetry format. There are times when people make poems with one word and stuff, but haikus are a very structured format. They are a traditional Japanese form of poetry. So a lot of the really traditional haiku poems that you look up online don't actually have the correct syllable count, and that's because they were originally written in Japanese, and that doesn't translate very well into English. So in order to preserve the meaning, the people who translate them often sacrifice meeting the syllable count. So for a haiku, the pattern is always going to be 5, 7, 5. 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, 5 syllables in the third line. So in order to break them down, my favorite thing to do first is just make sure that we have the correct amount of syllables. So, if you don't remember how to count syllables, I think that's something that most people are taught pretty young, but I've met people who don't really know how. A syllable is the different beats in a word. So for example, when you say costumes, there's 2 distinct beats, 2 distinct sounds, cos and tumes. Costumes. Costumes has 2 syllables. Whenever you count syllables, I like to count by tapping my finger on the table. So for example, in this first line, I would say, costumes everywhere. 5 syllables. So we know that we've got 5 syllables. There we go. 5 syllables, not 54. 5 syllables. Did I spell that right? Good job, me. Alright, and in our second line, shrieks of laughter fill the air. That's going to be 7 syllables. So a trick I use to actually help me count, and I wish I had a better camera setup so I could actually show you, is every syllable I tap a separate finger. So for costumes, I tap my thumb and then my pointer finger. For everywhere, I tap my middle finger for ev, my ring finger for re, and my pinky finger for where, and that tells me I have 5 syllables. And then I use my other hand once you get beyond that, so I use 2 fingers of my left hand when I count for this line. And finally, Happy Halloween. 5 syllables. So this tells us that this is definitely a haiku, in case you didn't trust me. And now for analyzing it. So haikus don't have to have any rhyme schemes. They don't really have to have anything besides their 3 lines with 5, 7, and 5 syllables. So now for analyzing this, I just like to give myself some extra room between lines. And then I'll just jot down, and I'm going to put this in italics right now. I'm going to analyze this. So, costumes everywhere. I think about what this image conjures up for me when I'm thinking about costumes. For me, it automatically makes me think of Halloween and a bunch of kids out trick-or-treating. If you haven't read the whole poem, but once you do read the whole poem, you would see that Happy Halloween. So this poem is clearly about Halloween. So I'm going to say that this line alludes to the tradition of wearing costumes to trick or treat on Halloween. And there's my note for that. Haikus are really simple, so you don't actually end up with too much, but it is important to look for things like imagery and allusions. So, let's see. And if you don't know what allusions and alluding is, then please read the word bank that was attached to the assignment sheet for this. Alright, on to the second line. We're going to make this italics as well. We're not going to open up another folder. Alright. Shrieks of laughter fill the air. So really think about what image that brings up in your mind. So when people laugh, it's generally like, ah ha ha ha, you're so funny. But shrieks of laughter makes me think of how little children sound when they're really, really excited. And it's almost like they're screaming. So this is using imagery. Specifically, auditory imagery. It's kind of expanding on what this sound is. It's not just ha ha ha. It's little children screaming with laughter because they're so happy. And finally, Happy Halloween. This is a traditional saying. It's just saying Happy Halloween. It's telling us this is about Halloween and that Halloween is happy. But I'm just going to make a little quick note about this being about this tiny text. Let me fix that. There we go. So it's a traditional Halloween greeting. And there I have broken down this poem and taken notes on every line. A good rule of thumb when you are breaking down poems is to take notes specifically on every single line. Sometimes there's lines in there that don't really seem to do anything special, and that's okay. You can skip those, but there's almost always something interesting to write about in every line of a poem. For the next part, we have to analyze this poem. Analysis. There we go. We're going to just underline that real quick. There we go. So, you're supposed to write just a brief paragraph when you analyze a poem. For this particular poem, it's really short, so you might find that you only have like 3 sentences worth of things to say. Or you could say or you could be really wordy about it. You could come up with a lot of things to write. The longer the poem, the more you usually have to write about it. So, whereas you could write a whole essay about a longer poem, like what we'll be looking at next week, this you'd be lucky to get a paragraph in. So, we're gonna just analyze this real quickly. Just because this is basically a rough draft of an analysis and I'm not doing anything fancy with it, I'm just gonna be really brief about it. So I'm gonna say this poem is a haiku because, actually we're gonna get rid of that, there we go. We know this poem is a haiku because it follows the 5-7-5 syllable pattern. And then, let's see, I want to also talk about how costumes everywhere is an illusion, so I'm going to quote this. So I'm going to say the line, costumes everywhere, and this is line 1, gotta always include gotta always properly quote and include a citation for that. This came from line 1 of the poem, so I'm putting line 1 in parentheses. So the line costumes everywhere is an allusion to the tradition. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste this because I'm being a bit lazy today. There we go. Make sure that's spelled correctly. And then we're also going to add a note about line 2. I like the use of imagery here. So I'm going to say shrieks of laughter, line 2, uses imagery to conjure the sound of children who are not only, if I can spell that right, So, shrieks of laughter, line 2, conjures the sound, or uses imagery to conjure the sound of children who are not only happy and laughing, but so full of joy on this day that they are screaming with it. And that is basically how you analyze a haiku.